The next topic on the list is Josh Trank's Fantastic Four reboot. So let me just tell you where I'm coming at from this as a comic book fan or just a fan of movies in general. To be honest, I haven't actually seen the ones that they produced in the early 2000s. And stop me if you disagree, but you're coming from a place where Reed Richards is just kind of like your standard Bing Crosby 50s dad. He works too much and he hates his family, and he kind of unleashes on them when they don't do what he wants. And we've even seen that in the comics with a little bit of spousal abuse.
Especially the older ones from the 60s.
And his power itself, his power to stretch and wrap his arms around things and to keep people from escaping his reach, very creepy to me.
Yeah, I can absolutely see where you're coming from. Like, creepy and a little bit ridiculous at the same time.
And then you've got Sue Richards herself, this may be even worse than Reed Richards because she's just kind of the stereotypical Pleasantville mom, but her power is to go unnoticed. Can't even stand it. And I'm sure they didn't do that for the last Fantastic Four set of movies. At least I really hope so. I'm sure they sort of sensitized it, made it an improvement on both these characters. Probably, I doubt Reed Richards was 50s dad, but this is why I'm coming at this from the perspective of I don't really care for the Fantastic Four.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting perspective, but you have to keep in mind that the comics were made in the 60s when women were supposed to be seen but not heard. Or in the case of Sue Richards, not even seen, just blend into the background. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could sort of latch on to Johnny Storm a little easier than those two, but, it's still just kind of annoying to me. Just kind of the young male, doesn't want to listen to anybody, says wow a lot. I guess I kind of like the Thing. He's kind of cool because he's kind of a big rock dude, and I think there's room for that. I think the big, gross New Yorker kind of persona works in this case, and so I guess I could do with the Thing. It's just the rest of the cast sort of bothers me, the rest of the cast of characters. What's your impression of Fantastic Four just as a property?
Well, as a property, I think they are a little bit dated. They are very important in history because they are Marvel's first family, and they essentially launched the Marvel universe as we know it. It all started with the Fantastic Four. Everything else is spun off from it. But everything else that came later, I think, is more timeless and generally just translates better across generations, whereas the Fantastic Four are a little bit passé, for lack of better words. That being said, I do believe that if you are to make a movie with the Fantastic Four, the way you should do it is just go all out with what you have. They are, in a sense, the most traditionally Disney of all the Marvel characters. And I think that a Fantastic Four movie should go all out Disney. There are many who say that there exists one movie right now which captures the spirit of the Fantastic Four, and that movie is called The Incredibles.
Yeah, I can see that.
No, because that movie really captured the spirit of the stories, and it was very much so inspired by the Fantastic Four as well, where you have a family and you have the family dynamics. Sure. What I am not a fan of, and I know that the majority of the Fantastic Four fan base agree with me on, is that what these characters absolutely do not need is a dark and gritty reboot. Because the thing to keep in mind here is that you have not seen the Fantastic Four movies from 2005 and 2007, and believe me, you don't have to. You really haven't missed anything there. And I think that this movie here, the reboot, is really trying to differentiate itself from those two really overtly stupid movies.
But does anybody even remember those movies? Why do they have to distance themselves so harshly?
That is a good question. I think that many people remember them, like especially non-comic book fans. If you say the Fantastic Four, they're not going to think about the comics. They're going to think about, wasn't that some kind of stupid movie in the 2000s? Because those movies were made at the absolute worst of the Tom Rothman era at Fox. So if you are to compare to them, then yes, they absolutely need to differentiate from those movies. But I don't think going dark and gritty is the way to do it. They should just do it right instead of finding new ways of doing it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, speaking generally, I mean, dark and gritty is something that we've been trying to inject this into comics for years, you know? I mean, in some places it's worked a little better than others. For example, with X-Men sort of trying to keep the tone darker, hasn't really blown up in their face. I mean, I think most people would admit there's lots of good parts of those movies, even if as a series as a whole there were kind of mixed results. But primarily, I mean, it sort of works for Batman because he comes from a darker place. You know, for other members of the Bat family, sure. But when you just, as a rule, try to make everything darker, let's stick everybody in black leather, let's make everybody look very unhappy, that's not where comics really came from in the first place, so I don't think it's necessary.
Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind, we here at Midnight's Edge, we're all about dark and gritty. We love darker side of comics, but it has to be characters that naturally lend themselves to be dark and gritty. And that is something that Fantastic Four, if you are to remain true to the spirit of them, which we also value, just don't do. They don't lend themselves to being dark and gritty. And that is something that I think most fans see. Like, you can never please all fans, but you can please a great number of them, and people are willing to forget many changes from the source material, provided that you, one, make a good movie, and two, you stick true to the spirit of the stories. But the moment that you betray the spirit of the stories, then you're on shaky ground. And making the Fantastic Four the most fantastic and happy-go-lucky bunch in the Marvel Universe, make them dark and gritty, you betray the spirit of the comics.
So, just moving along to the new movie that we're talking about, the 2015 film. I mean, this is coming out pretty quick, right? Is it June or July?
I think it's August, isn't it?
August,
well,
okay.
Yes, it's August. They're trying to copy the success of last year's Guardians of the Galaxy by occupying that release date. Unless they moved it, like they've moved it several times already. I'm just going to do a quick fact check here, because they've moved it up and down, which generally I think can be interpreted as a sign that they don't want it to bump, because I think they're a little bit, well, shall we say, not entirely confident in the project they have.
But they're not doing a very good job of that with this movie.
Exactly. No, the release date is around the 7th of August. So it's the same spot as Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a pretty good date all in all.
And I don't know if there's any other huge August movies coming out this year. Last year we kind of had a deluge of movies in August. I remember there were at least 3 or 4 different movies I wanted to see. I didn't even get to wind up seeing them all in the theater, because it's just like, well, who has time to go to the movie every week?
There is something to be said for that.
So yeah, maybe they'll have a little more success this year. So you've got this director, Josh Trank. We covered this. I wouldn't pile into it too much, because we just did this great video covering this and kind of his trajectory with the movie. But I think it stands to say that's been a huge thorn in this movie side.
It's really a sad case if you think about it, because if you've seen Chronicle, this is a guy who obviously has some talent, but like so many other people before him, whether it be in creative arts or in sports or what have you not, you have these people who have amazing talent and they can conquer the world, but then they have some personal demons and they go piss it all away. He's had opportunities that almost everyone else on the planet would kill for. This is a guy who went from a fairly low budget movie, which he made into a hit, and then he got hired to do a Marvel movie. Well, not a proper Marvel movie, but still a Marvel branded movie. It's a pretty big thing. And from that to Star Wars. So he's on a trajectory where he, in theory, he's gonna rise. He's gonna be a superstar. All he has to do is simply not fuck it up. And what does he do? Well, if reports are to be believed, he's drunk and high on the set, smashing things up, abusive to cast. almost reads like a parody.
Yeah, it's a story that's too strange for. I mean, we're used to hearing strange stories out of Hollywood, especially after some time has passed. But that we're immediately hearing these big weird stories.
We also have some more speculation here, because also keep in mind that what we said in the previous report and what we're going to say now, this is all rumor, speculation, and conjecture, in that it does not come from an official source. No one has gone out and made a statement, this is what happened. Instead, you have off-the-record chats, which are picked up by some news outlets, and in other cases, you then even have the people involved directly who go into various chat rooms and message boards and relay their stories. And one of the things we've learned really recently is that the movie is still being reshot. And that is something that comes from the Deadline Hollywood message boards, with some claimed insiders from there who say that the movie is currently in its second round of reshoots, and that these reshoots are being held not by Josh Trank but by producer Matthew Vaughn, who is there trying to fix things, because apparently the first line of reshoots were there to add more action to the picture, because the first cut of the movie, it is claimed, played fairly well, but it was long and boring and very little happened. So the story goes that in the first batch of reshoots they added more action, and after the action was added, the movie apparently is a little bit uneven, that the mix between the action and the story sections doesn't really work, so now they are back yet again fixing that. So what do you think about that? Does that sound plausible?
It does. I mean, at least, knowing the limited amount I do, it's certainly very messy. That's going to be interesting to see what they actually come out with. In a way, I actually kind of hope they do come out with a good movie, because I'd hate to see this guy ruin what so many people have invested in. On the other hand, if not, it's going to be really easy for Marvel to say, well, this is why we don't like leaving our properties with other studios that we don't trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that in the end, they're probably going to make a decent movie, because they really pull out all the stops here. If it is true that Matthew Vaughn, who hasn't made a bad movie in his life, if Matthew Vaughn is doing the reshoots and Simon Kinberg is still writing them, then I think they're probably going to pull a fairly decent movie out of the hat in the end.
You think maybe even better than the prior not-so-great attempts?
I don't think it takes much to make a better movie than the prior attempts. But much like the Punisher 2004 movie, they can make a good movie, but will it be a good movie that at the same time respects its source material? And that I very much doubt, because the cast, they're all very good actors. No one can take that away from them. But do they fit the characters they're portraying? That, of course, is another discussion. And it's also Doctor Doom. Have you seen the stills? He looks kind of like this.
I saw the shot from the trailer.
He really looks like a homeless beggar clad in duct tape. And
maybe I didn't see that shot. I just saw the one of his face.
Yeah, well, it's probably zoomed in on his face for a reason. But so how is that going to play out in the end? How much have they changed? We won't know until we see the movie, and the movie might not be too bad in the end. But I think that the story behind the movie and the drama there is much more interesting than the movie itself is ever going to be. And the movie will no doubt forever be tainted by it. As for Josh Trank, he got himself fired from Star Wars. How do you recover from that? First of all, getting Star Wars, that's an amazing thing to begin with. But getting fired from it, that's even more amazing. And I don't think that's something you can ever live down.
No.
Like his agents, they must be going nuts. And it's like also what he said in public was that he had some ideas of wanting to do other stuff, and it was right
other
for
than
him.
Star Wars?
yeah, like, this is all bullshit. If he was serious about that, his representative would have dropped him instantly.
I mean, I'm not even the biggest Star Wars fan in the world, but if somebody came to me and was like, hey, do you want to work on the new Star Wars movie? I'd have to be crazy not to.
Not only that, if you got fired from it, everyone would know, and everyone would always whisper that behind your back. That's the guy who got fired from Star Wars. Who's going to want to work with that guy again? Because what I'm thinking is that, okay, so he'll never be a Star Wars director. He'll always be the guy who got fired from Star Wars. But maybe someone out there wants the director from Chronicle, which is a fairly decent movie. But even they might be hesitant because they might instead get the director of the Fantastic Four. So I don't think it's going to do any wonders to his career, no matter how you look at it.
So I certainly hope there's a nicer takeaway from this, but what I fear may be the ultimate takeaway from this is that Josh Trank is not only going to be hurting his own career, but he's going to take Fox with him, and that what people are going to think about Fox and their various Marvel properties, which they're sitting on somewhat. I wouldn't say illegitimately, but with some point of contention, is that they're like a bitter mate, which is that they don't appreciate you and they will treat you like garbage for all the wrong reasons, but they also won't let you leave and find somebody who will love you either. And there's no doubt that Marvel would love this property much better than Fox has.
Oh, absolutely. If there is one silver lining, it might be that this all just maybe helps Marvel get their properties back in the end.
For more great podcasts, news, and reviews, visit our site at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.